On the edge of a quiet, forgotten coastline, an old man named Elias lived alone in a small house. Every night he sat on his porch, watching the horizon disappear into the night sky. The stars twinkled above, and the soft rhythm of the waves was his only companion. But tonight, something was different. As the moonlight danced on the water, Elias noticed a figure walking along the shore. Cloaked in a flowing robe, the figure seemed to blend into the night, and the waves rippled gently with their steps. Intrigued, Elias rose from his chair and slowly approached. "Who are you?" Elias asked, his voice soft against the sound of the sea. The figure turned slightly but did not meet his gaze. "I am the keeper of these waters," the figure said, their voice as calming as the ocean breeze. "For many years I have watched over the tides, waiting for those who come seeking answers." Elias felt a deep sense of calm, despite the strangeness of the encounter. "Why do you appear now, after all this time?" "Because the sea has a story to tell you," the figure replied, their gaze still fixed on the horizon. "And it is time for you to listen." Elias stood beside the figure, watching the waves lap against the shore. He had come to this quiet place years ago, retreating from the world after the loss of his wife. For years he had listened to the sea, hoping its rhythm would soothe his grief. Yet deep down, he knew he hadn't truly found peace. "What story does the sea want to tell me?" Elias asked quietly. The figure knelt beside the water, running their hand through the gentle waves. "The sea does not take, Elias," they said softly. "It carries. It carries the things too heavy for us to hold, but it also returns what we are ready to receive." Elias frowned, the weight of his sorrow pressing down on him. "I lost everything," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I lost her." The figure stood and gestured toward the horizon. "Look closer," they said. "The sea remembers." Elias squinted, gazing out at the endless expanse of water. Slowly, the horizon seemed to shift, and for the first time in years, he saw something he had forgotten, a memory of his wife. She had loved the sea, and her laughter had once blended with the waves. The image was vivid, as though the sea itself was giving it back to him. "I couldn't save her," Elias said, his voice cracking. "No," the figure replied gently. "But the sea carried your grief, waiting until you were ready to let it go." Tears welled in Elias's eyes. For years he had blamed himself, carrying the weight of guilt and regret. But now, standing by the sea, he realized that holding on to that pain had kept him from living. "What do I do now?" Elias asked, his voice trembling. "Let go," the figure said, their voice soft but certain. "Let the sea carry your sorrow, and it will return to you something far more precious, the memory of love." Elias knelt at the water's edge, letting the cool waves wash over his hands. He closed his eyes, allowing the sound of the ocean to flow through him. Slowly, he felt the weight of his grief begin to lift, carried away by the tide, and in its place, he felt something warm and gentle, a quiet peace he hadn't known in years. When he opened his eyes, the figure was gone, and the beach was silent once more. The stars shimmered above, and the waves continued their gentle rhythm, but the air felt lighter, as if the sea had carried away the burdens of his heart. Elias stood, gazing out at the horizon one last time. The sea had returned to him not the pain of loss, but the pure memory of love. Smiling softly to himself, he turned and walked back toward his small house by the shore, the sound of the waves still echoing in his heart, not as a reminder of sorrow, but as a song of peace. The Night of the Starry Waves is a story about loss, healing, and the journey toward finding peace after profound grief. The protagonist, Elias, is an elderly man living in solitude by the sea, where he sought refuge after the death of his wife. For years, Elias has lived isolated from the world, believing that the constant rhythm of the ocean would soothe his heartache and help him find solace. However, he realizes through an encounter with a mystical figure that he has not truly found peace. He has merely been avoiding the depths of his grief. The story explores the theme of nature as both a physical and spiritual force. Elias has always felt a connection to the sea, but it has been more of a passive relationship, one in which he thought the ocean could erase his pain. The figure he encounters, described as a keeper of the waters, represents the personification of the sea's wisdom and its deeper connection to human emotions. This mysterious figure serves as a guide for Elias, urging him to confront his unresolved emotions and let go of the grief that has weighed him down for so long. The turning point in the story comes when Elias is asked to listen to the sea. The figure explains that the sea does not merely take, as Elias once believed, but carries and remembers, offering back what we are ready to receive. The sea is presented as a keeper of memories and emotions, holding Elias's grief until he is ready to face it. In this way, the sea is a symbol of both Elias's past and his path toward healing. As Elias begins to listen and reflect, he experiences a series of memories, particularly of his wife, who once shared his love for the ocean. These memories come alive in a mystical way as the horizon shifts, allowing Elias to see his wife again, not in the painful context of her loss, but in a more tender and comforting light. It is through this revelation that Elias begins to realize that his wife has always been with him, not physically, but through the love they shared, which the sea has preserved. The story also delves into themes of guilt and self-forgiveness. Elias has carried immense guilt over his wife's death, feeling that he could not save her. His retreat into isolation is driven by this guilt, as he punishes himself by withdrawing from life. The figure, however, helps him to understand that the sea has been holding his grief all along, waiting for him to be ready to let it go. By embracing the ocean and allowing it to carry his sorrow, Elias is able to release the burden of guilt and finally feel at peace. This transformative moment is depicted when Elias steps into the water, symbolically allowing the sea to wash away the weight of his grief. The sea, which had once represented his isolation and sorrow, now becomes a source of healing. The story concludes with Elias emerging from this emotional journey with a renewed sense of peace. Though he still carries the memory of his wife, it is no longer a painful one. It has become a source of comfort, a reminder of love rather than loss. Throughout the story, the setting plays a significant role in reflecting Elias's inner emotional state. The quiet, moonlit coastline mirrors his sense of loneliness and detachment, while the vastness of the sea represents both the depth of his grief and the possibility of something greater beyond it. The figure, who appears almost as an extension of the sea, represents the wisdom and patience of nature, waiting for the right moment to guide Elias toward the truth he needs to hear. In the end, The Night of the Starry Waves is a deeply introspective story about healing through acceptance and connection. It explores the idea that true peace comes not from escaping pain, but from embracing it, processing it, and allowing it to transform. Elias's journey from grief to peace is not a simple one. It is filled with hesitation, fear, and doubt, but it is ultimately a hopeful story. It reminds us that even in our darkest moments, we are not alone. The sea, like life, holds our grief until we are ready to release it, and when the time is right, it offers back the love and memories we thought we had lost. The final image of Elias walking back to his small house by the shore, no longer burdened by his sorrow, signifies that while grief may never completely leave us, it can evolve into something beautiful. The sound of the waves, which once mirrored Elias's isolation, now echoes in his heart as a song of peace, a reminder of the love he shared and the journey he has taken toward healing. In summary, The Night of the Starry Waves is a contemplative tale about the transformative power of nature, the importance of facing grief, and the journey toward self-forgiveness. Through the metaphor of the sea, the story conveys a message of hope, that even in the face of loss, we can find peace by letting go of our burdens and embracing the love that remains.